based on your experiences, like who is doing, if you don't want to name anybody, but like what are the best practices you've seen in ensuring AI is more ethical in nature or more responsibly deployed in nature? Doesn't, you're minimizing the unintended consequences, right? Give me some examples or stories there.
Yeah, so in general, a lot of places, what I've seen are at this point just starting with regulations, so things that they need to do to be in compliance. So those are the more common thing, right? Because that's sort of the required thing. Um, where I've seen interesting things is where your places, are doing things that are not currently under regulations or anything, but they start identifying issues. So I'll give you an example from Spotify. I worked there for a few months during my sabbatical a few years ago. And some of us were there who were like researchers. I was a visiting researcher. We're interested in this issue of fairness. In the context of Spotify, what we found, which is actually true for many, many other companies, is you're essentially a marketplace. So you have users. So in this Spotify's case, there are listeners, and then you have artists. And there's often a mismatch in what you have available and what you provide. So typically, if you think about music, there are millions and millions of tracks. There are hundreds of thousands of artists. A user coming to a platform is usually going to see a handful of recommendations or things, albums or artists and things. Sure, they can search for it, they can browse it, but most users don't have that much time, patience to really go through your entire catalog and to sample things, right? So they're really
Yep.
relying on your recommendation. So what we found at Spotify is we have a very skewed and quote unquote unfair system because there are this 90% of the stuff that don't get recommended, don't actually get seen by most users. And because they're not being seen, the listeners don't know that they would even like this, right?
Yeah.
And so you have no data
And
about them, right?
yep.
So this creates this vicious cycle, right? Where people see the popular artists, that's what they listen, and then Spotify learns that, hey, that's a, so it's like
That's the
that's what makes
popular
it popular,
artist.
right?
So
So how do you,
yeah.
what do you like? First off, do you do anything about it? And then two, of course, what do you do about it? So in case of Spotify, they recognize that this is actually bad in a long term. Why? Because you have like, currently the streaming industry is artists don't get things for producing, they get things for streaming, right? So Spotify or any other streaming provider will only
Yep.
pay to the
Pay you.
artist if
Yeah.
their music is streamed. So imagine all this, like 90% of the artists who don't get their music streamed, that's not going to be good for them. They're not going to be able to make their living. They're going to stop creating. They're going to drop off the platform, right? Um, Not only that, the popular artists are also more expensive. So for every minute that somebody streams,
You
Spotify
pay
has
some
to
more dollars.
pay
Yeah.
more to a popular stream versus less popular stream. So this was a case where in introducing, like thinking about this fairness and introducing diversity was in everybody's best interest, right? That it will allow the users to discover new music, new things. It will allow the less known artists to be discovered. It will give Spotify an ability to balance better, like their payouts.
Yep.
And so Spotify started working on this. I mean, again, this whole thing stemmed from some of us just being interested in the issue of fairness. But when the case was made that, hey, this is also good for business, right? Then
Then things started.
there's a
Yeah.
more interest and excitement about it, right? Um,
Y-
and you can imagine
Yeah.
this being same for a lot of other. So if you think about it, Amazon, you got millions of products that are new. They don't have reviews or ratings, and
Mm.
a consumer is less likely to buy something that doesn't have review or rating. So then this again creates this vicious cycle where lots of these products don't get seen, don't get bought, and because they don't get bought or seen, they're not going to generate ratings or revenue or reviews. And so again, it would be in Amazon's interest to not have the consumers just tied
Yeah.
to this the head of it,
Yeah.
but also be exposed to tail.
It's actually what is really clearly coming through on both those examples is back to your early comment on, well, if your business model was display ads for engagement, you have no incentive to change the way things work, as in case of Google or Facebook. But if it's not good for business by having a small group of people drive more engagement, listenership, or whatever on the platform, or reviews, or more business on the platform, and since your business model is being that arbitration marketplace, if you will, right, that you're actually helping people discover more products or more talent and artists and so forth, it only works when you have aligned your incentives for it,
Mhm.
not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's not just because we found a problem, and then I know you guys wanted to work on a problem, and then you later discovered it's actually good for business too. But I can almost think of the other side of this is like, if it is not good for business, if it doesn't align with your incentives for your business, it's almost impossible to actually implement a theoretically fair or more
Yeah.
less biased system to do it, right? And